As the city of Christchurch recovers from the earthquakes, a young couple attempts to rekindle their relationship. In the opening scene, we see the protagonist Eve. She is standing in the water as images of her and Charlie go through her mind, as well as their memories. The scene cuts, and then we see them at the beach, being romantic and in love. Her laughs could be heard as we see different sets from their relationship. Their favorite place is the beach, and they are affectionate with each other. Climbing up a rock, he offers to jump into the water first, but she claims that they should do it together. Grabbing her hand, he whispers in her ear before they make a splash. The scene cuts, and we're taken to the present. Eve drives down the road to the airport as the radio plays loudly. The reporter talks about the devastating losses of the earthquakes, but keeps it on the bright side, claiming that everything can be rebuilt. Eve's phone starts ringing, but she can't gather up the courage to answer it, knowing that it's Charlie. Biting her nails out of nervousness, she picks up the phone and listens to the voicemail. With an awkward tone, he lets her know that he's landed, and that he'll be waiting for her. Despite not having the courage to talk to him, it brings a smile to her face knowing that he's in the city. Seeing him surprises her, but she keeps her cool as they embraced each other in a hug, just like the old times. Looking at her belly, he struggles to find the words to say. Changing the theme, she asks what time he has to go back, and he informs her that he needs to be back in the morning. The situation is pretty awkward, so he decides to give her the things he's brought for her. After giving her bag back, he pulls out a toy koala and plays with it, trying to ease the situation, but she's not having it. As they sit in the car, he manages to ask her whether he can rub the belly. Putting his hand on her stomach, he caresses the bub, but doesn't say anything. Eve suggests they finally go, so he takes his hand off her. As they drive their way to Eve's house, they listen to the radio once again. Ruins and half-buildings make up the city as the civilians talk about staying and helping to get it rebuilt. Before they go back, they stop at a building for Charlie and ask what time he needs to leave the following day, given that he works for the military. About to get out of the car, he asks her to come with him, but she ends up staying in the car. Flashbacks run through her head, as it is not the first time she wishes he didn't have to go back. She remembers the time when they were just two lovebirds before she was pregnant. Even though she doesn't say it now, she used to say it every time before he left. But he would always give her the same answer: that time is not important. Sitting at the cafe, uncomfortable silence fills the atmosphere before Charlie decides to speak up. He reveals that it's nice to see her, and she thanks him for coming. Golden curls fall onto his arms as he lets his hair down, and she pokes fun at him for being in the army. The conversation about his job opens up, and not being able to handle it, she goes to the bathroom. Sitting alone, he receives a confirmation about his booking, which we'll later find out about. Later in the afternoon, they go to a baby store, and Charlie tries hard to cheer her up. Playing with different toys around the shop only annoys her even more, so he decides to stop. Looking at the baby bed, she lets him know that she's bought a crib. As she looks at the device for expressing milk, Charlie asks her to explain what it is. He claims that she won't need it, but she informs him that if she finds a job, the device will be of great help. They start bickering as Charlie demands she doesn't work, because there wouldn't be anyone to take care of the baby. Not having it, she decides to leave the store. Waiting for him outside the store, she gets surprised by him gifting her a bunny. As they part the car, Charlie struggles to shut the door, but she explains that she needs to lock it from the inside. Overall, they apologize to each other even for the tiniest things, showing that they're not comfortable with each other yet. Walking along in the park, he asks her how everything's been. Apart from the usual pregnancy aches, she informs him that she's fine. He asks about the morning sickness, so she explains that it lasted for a full day, for a shocking 6 weeks. Apart from the pain, she reveals being sensitive to smells like sunflowers, which are a part of her job. Once again, he scolds her for working, but she reminds him that she has expenses. However, her work is mostly online, so she uses that fact to calm him down. Passing the bridge, she struggles to put her jumper on, so he holds her purse, helping her. As they pass the flowery garden, they talk about how beautiful the place is. Eve opens up about her childhood, and how coming to the garden is something she remembers. As they walk around, she remembers the time she used to play with her sister, but he can't keep his eyes off her. Realizing that he might have gone too far, he apologizes for stepping out of line. As they stand on the bridge looking at the gondolas, she admits to always loving gondolas. As she continues walking down the path, he comes running up to her and offers her a ride in the gondola in a rather broken French accent. Despite her saying no, he claims that the ride is sensual and a once-in-a-lifetime experience. Realizing that he won't stop until she agrees, she finally says yes, and they share a genuine laugh. However, their moment is ruined by a guy running into them, who happens to know Eve. The guy caresses Eve's belly and even kisses her on the cheek, so Charlie's face drops. The rather bubbly guy introduces himself as Stefan, and Eve reveals that he's the gym instructor at her gym. Charlie stays quiet, which makes the situation even more awkward, so the guy decides to leave. Their ride on the gondola is silent until Charlie asks about the gender of the baby. He is offended about not being told, but she reminds him that they haven't spoken in 5 months. They move on, and he reveals that he thinks that it's a boy. However, she lets him know that it's a girl. The excitement doesn't fade from his face, but it's evident that he's not as happy. He asks about the name, and she reveals that she likes the name Sunday. Silence falls after the conversation, and with worry on her mind, she decides to be honest with him. Claiming that it's been bothering her to keep it a secret from him, she comes clean about asking him to visit. She didn't invite him to get back together, because he made it clear to her that the job was more important. He agrees that he should have told her before making the decision. She interrupts him, claiming that she would have never been okay having a baby with someone who isn't around. Given that it's old stuff, she doesn't want to argue, so she reveals one more thing. While he's been away, she admits to meeting someone and starting something with them. Eve begs him to at least say something. He utters some curse words, so she starts apologizing for not telling him earlier. After a long and dreadful silence, he finally speaks up and asks whether she loves the new guy. Mary falls into silence, unsure of how to answer such an important question. He keeps repeating the question, but she doesn't have an answer. Having had enough, he starts undressing and getting into the water while repeating the same question. Eve begs him to get back in the gondola, reminding him that the water is polluted. However, he doesn't give in and stays in the water until she gives him an answer. Finally, Eve admits to not knowing the guy well, and satisfied, he gets back in the gondola. Back in the city, after walking around and remembering the walks they used to take for a while, they sit by a cafe and talk about their orders. He accidentally curses in front of the unborn baby, so he apologizes, but she lets him know that the baby can't hear him. After grabbing a decaf coffee, they continue their walk. But Charlie can't help but look at the aftermath of the disaster. Standing in front of the half-torn cathedral, Eve tells the story of her christening and how ridiculous she looked. Given that they're talking about family, he reveals that he visited his father after 15 years, and the first thing he said to him was son. He describes him as older, lonely, and wasted away, which is the opposite of how he remembers him. He was so young and strong in his eyes, but that has faded away. Knowing the situation with his father, she assures him that she's proud of him for making a huge step. As they continue their journey, he sneaks in a couple of looks, but she seems to be focused on the road. Seeing each other without going to the beach would be incomplete, so that's where we see them next. Their feet sink into the wet sand as water washes away. Closing her eyes, Eve takes it all in. He asks her what the beach reminds her of, and her answer is summer, freedom, and crab picking at her grandparents' house. Later on, they have fun at the beach, playing with the waves and enjoying the summer breeze, just like the old days. Rubbing her feet in the sand, she asks him about whether he has memories that stand out for no reason. Her core memory is being 8, on the beach at her grandparents' house with her whole family gathered. Nothing specific, just fun times. He starts talking about the memories he has with her, but she stops him and asks to say something from his childhood. Peanut butter and honey sandwiches are what he remembers, and his mother used to put the brown bread at the bottom to get them to eat healthier. Curious about her plans, he asks whether she's staying in her city or moving. Given that she needs her family, Eve plans to stay in the city and raise her baby there. He is concerned about their safety, but she assures him that they'll be fine. Looking at the waves in front of her, she admits to being homesick for her grandparents' house, given that they used to spend their summers there. Wanting to return to what they have, he suggests revisiting the house, and she agrees. As they enter the house, they can't help but smile as all the memories come back. As they stand in the living room, looking at old photos, Eve reveals that her sister Bailey is getting married. The conversation about being with the one sparks up, so Charlie admits to thinking that she was the one from the very beginning. She reminds him that he was drunk when he met her, but he claims that she'll always be the one for him. Eve was the one who initiated a conversation, and the first thing she asked him was bizarre. He asks her whether she remembers, and after some time she finally admits it. The first topic of their conversation was sex, and as they started dancing, she wondered whether it had been smart to get into a relationship based on sex. Instead of answering, he asks her whether she's happy without him. Tears fill her eyes as she looks at him, so he apologizes for hurting her. She admits to hating him, and he claims that it's okay to feel that way, but she lets go, claiming that she doesn't want to live like that. He suggests going to her parents, but she doesn't think that it's a good idea. After visiting her grandparents' graves, they finally go to her house, where chickens seem to be walking around. He asks her about the chickens, and she tells him that she rescued them. Right as he's about to go watch TV in the living room, she reveals that she had a dream about him the previous night. Although it was an innocent dream at first, as Eve looked down, she realized that her hand was missing. She remembers falling in the dream before forcing herself to wake up, and that makes her cry. Curling up in a ball, she lets her tears fall as Charlie sits beside her to make her feel better. Claiming that she's tired, he lets her fall asleep as he enjoys a chicken sandwich in the kitchen, happy that she's eating meat again. Looking through the shelves, he picks up the photo album. Turning the pages, he sees lots of photos, until he comes across a photo of Eve and the guy she's seeing. Jealous, he takes the photo and hides it in a random book, so he won't be able to find it. He is upset, but once he goes into the baby room, all of the anger disappears. Looking through the baby stuff makes his smile reappear. Entering the bathroom, he goes about his business when he notices 2 toothbrushes by the sink. Jealous, he overtakes him once again as he grabs the blue toothbrush, assuming that it's the guy's, urinates over it, and places it back in the cup. In the kitchen, he notices the tap leaking, so he decides to fix it to waste time while Eve's sleeping. After fixing the tap, he hears the doorbell ring, so he heads to answer it. Opening the door, he sees a guy with headphones, and he introduces himself as part of the freestyle rapper group. Charlie lets him know that he didn't order service from them, but rather from a birthday guy, so he sends him back. Eve notices the commotion and comes out herself. The guy uses the chance to start rapping, and even though it's funny, the surprise cheers her up. As he finishes, Eve hugs him, unable to control her laughter. After the not-so-romantic gesture, Eve takes him to a life-size chess game. Even though they're a couple of minutes into the game, Eve ends up beating him, and he can't be more surprised. As they sit down, she admits to missing him, and all the activities they used to do together. They start talking about exploring different planets, and the only people Charlie claims to take there are her and the baby. There, he'd build them a house on the beach, and every morning they would wake up to the sound of the ocean. After exploring the city for a while, the darkness finally falls, so they go to a hill to see the city. Eve still can't believe that he would order her a freestyle, so they joke about it. Silence fills the car as they sit in complete darkness. Gathering the courage, Eve finally asks him whether he's thought about being a dad before, and he struggles with the words to say it. He admits to wanting a family with her, so she asks him whether he's going to stop going away. Tears fill her eyes as she realizes that he hasn't changed, and he keeps quiet instead of answering the question. He reminds her that he was working the same job when she met him, and she claims to have been in love and stupid. Again, he reminds her that he has to work for the money, and that he doesn't intervene in her job. Both of them want to be with each other, and Charlie finally admits to it. She bickers with him for taking so long to finally admit it, but he reminds her that she hooked up with the trainer very soon after their separation. Informing her that he knows about the photo and the toothbrush, he admits to urinating on it as revenge. Confused, Eve lets him know that the toothbrush is for her guns, given that she's more sensitive while pregnant. The real problem is his job, and he's going away all the time, but he assures her that he'll always come back. A flashback runs through his mind as he's reminded of an important phone call. Driving to the apartment, they're reminded of the times they used to go out and return to the apartment. Walking in, we see the flashback of one particular night when they made love. However, now it's different, as there's no passion, no affection, but there is a baby on the way. As they lay down in bed, Charlie gets closer to her belly, and the baby kicks. Out of excitement, Eve tells herself that the baby is a boy, and he catches her. Of course he's confused, but he doesn't get angry as excitement fills his body, knowing that he's about to have a son. As far as the name goes, she admits to making up the name, and that she's not sure about naming him Sunday. As he gets closer to the belly once again, to talk to his son this time, she makes fun of him, so he tickles her. Getting off of each other, they look into each other's eyes and admit they love each other. With tears in her eyes, she lets him know that she doesn't want him to go the following day. However, he claims that there's no other way. The following morning, as the sun rises, Eve drives Charlie to the airport. The whole ride there, Charlie seems to be in a good mood, but as they arrive at the airport, his smile drops. Embraced in each other's arms, they stand head to head, feeling each other's presence for the last time. Tears fill her eyes as she looks at him, but he doesn't dare to open his. As they let go, he looks at her before walking off. Before he goes to the gate, he chimes and sees her already looking at him. With peace, he finally leaves.